Basically, that is all that's left of the guy that gets blown up. But he's still alive for like a minute, and just blood's like...
Ah, right.
Yeah.
So I have to finish this movie, apparently, is what you're trying to tell me. Welcome to Film Dorks Podcast, number 7. I'm Nick.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Lucas.
There we go. Okay, now it's official. We've started.
We're off to the races.
And we're doing this podcast and we are reviewing a few movies. Is this correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to be talking about The Old Guard, The Five Bloods, and Guns Akimbo.
Guns
right?
Akimbo?
Correct.
Okay, so a bunch of stuff on your favorite streaming services, Netflix and Amazon. I think this is where these all can be found.
Yeah,
what do you want to start with?
You know, there ain't no movie theaters no more.
There ain't no movie theaters. There ain't no nothing. Your house is now a movie theater. You know, it's so weird too. Like, when is it gonna come back? Like, what's gonna happen to some of these chains? Like, are people gonna want to go back to the movies at this point? Like, because I don't see them opening back up again for a while.
No.
I think there was some minor openings, but I don't think anybody was going to see things. Like, there was no big movies released for the short window period where some of these theaters opened up before, COVID swallowed us.
Well, viewership was down before the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, movie theaters have kind of been circling the bowl for a while.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think let's just say all this comes to a miraculous ending at some point soon. People are so starved for like social interaction and like going out and doing things that
you think it'll help?
I mean, at least for a little while. People are going to want to go out and do stuff with their friends, and going to a big movie theater to see a big movie is still,
Yeah,
fun.
I wonder though. I mean, there's also going to be a ton of people who are just trepidatious to go into a packed movie theater or a packed bar. I mean, there's going to be people who aren't. But I'm
talking about like there's a vaccine in the works and stuff like that. So at some point it's going to be like over.
Right.
But
I don't think that's going to be until next year, and I'm just curious as to how the fallout for movie theaters.
It's a really good question, and honestly, like the trends that were happening before the pandemic anyway were, for example, I think I've talked about and maybe written about the Hollywood Theater in Portland. It's a nonprofit-based model, membership model. Mm-hmm. And it was about, they would have new runs, but it would be more about the really incredible programming, getting guests, writers, directors, actors to come and speak on panels. And, they were constantly sold out for like every show. Synchronized.
Neither of us were paying attention. We were both trying to time our bowls properly.
No, listen, as long as the audience
I think that was a success.
I'm curious to see if those theaters are going to survive, because if they do, I think they're only going to be more primed to then be more popular. Because what you guys are describing, which is, community, people going out and seeing stuff with your friends, sure, new runs are important, but like, let's be real, the new runs you can watch on your computer or your phone or on your home entertainment theater. And so I feel like making it an experience more than just a new release is what is going to be the trends, even for the big chains, which I think are going to have to adapt. They were going to have to adapt anyway.
I mean, the movie theaters aren't going to die because people, you can't get the movie theater experience at home. You just can't fucking do it unless you have a literal movie theater in your home. Which
watching with a crowd is a unique experience. It's not meant for every film, but there is something to be said about it. And I don't think they'll ever go away. So when they come back, what are they going to be like? Is I think where we're at.
There's a couple movies that are still slated to be theatrical releases this year, like Tenet, and they're still at this point, like at least on paper, trying to get movies out in theaters, and I think as soon as August. So
that seems like a bad idea.
Where that happens, who knows? I mean, maybe it's just going to be in deepest, darkest, no mask land or whatever. But they got $250 million into Tenet, from what I've heard. So they're going to need to be making that back, and I know Netflix isn't going to cover it.
Yeah. Well, I guess, the thing is we'll see where the chips fall and how they fall and when they fall, But in the meantime, we're all stuck with streaming. So let's get into some reviews of some stuff that we've streamed over the last week or so. Let's start. You want to start with the old guard since that's the biggest new release?
I have the new one.
And?
She stabbed me, so I think she has potential.
So how old are you?
We met in the Crusades.
The Crusades?
We fought thousands of battles side by side.
So we really never die.
Nothing that lives forever.
Just because we keep living doesn't mean we stop hurting. These individuals are extremely resistant to capture.
You okay? Yeah, I'm fine. It just hurts. Actually, everything hurts.
I think it's Netflix's most successful feature release.
Yeah, they're very stingy with releasing their numbers, and they were like, every time they do, it's because they want to show off. And this one, I think they said something like 75 million views.
I thought that Extraction was still higher by like a couple of million or something.
It's possible.
I could be wrong, but I swore I saw something. Maybe it was a one
either
day.
Way, it's a
huge success for Netflix.
It's a hit, yeah. And I think rightfully so. I mean, it's not a perfect movie for sure, but they really nailed their world creating and their the messages are all on point. The writing's a little wonky in some spots, and there's some holes here and there, but the storytelling and the entertainment value of it's off the charts. The action is amazing.
And I know it was written by Greg Rucka, I think his name is who is actually the writer of the comic book. And I don't know how much experience he has
graphic novel, motherfucker.
Sorry, graphic novel. You're correct. No offense. But yeah, so I don't know how much actual experience he has screenwriting. I feel like he's fairly new to that. I could be wrong. In which case, I think he did a really good job overall. But I do, I do feel like some of the dialogue was a little, stiff, a little too comic booky. So the delivery, they had a really solid cast on this one. So that certainly helped. Yeah. But there were some moments where the dialogue was a little too tough, one-linery, or it teetered on trying to say something, but couldn't find a poetic way. So it was really direct. So there were some points where it felt a little stiff. But
one of the things that might be kind of like difficult in translating a graphic novel to a 2-hour movie is there's a lot of graphic novel story. There's a whole lot there that the people that are fans are going to expect to see some sort of thread of somehow. So they have to cram a whole lot into 2 hours, which was something that we were talking about off camera. Is that this might have been better as a series.
It felt like a TV pilot.
Some of the dialogue and some of the setups kind of felt almost like a procedural. Like the first 10 minutes especially, I thought that this was going to be like a shitty Jason Bourne ripoff where everybody's like just tired of the job and everything's talking in half sentences and
I've been doing this for too long.
Yeah. Which later on, when you find out what's going on, it makes sense. The character makes sense and all that. And obviously, Charlize Theron's a best of the
mega
best
babe.
Actress.
Yeah, it's really
mega
interesting
babe,
how she became such a dominant
badass
action hero, right? Like, who saw that one coming?
I mean, come on. Like, look, Mad Max, she was fucking awesome.
That's probably
in
one of
that
my
movie.
top
like
5 movies of all
and then
time.
she did Atomic
she's been
Blonde.
doing action movies for almost 20 years now. On top of Oscar caliber performances like Monster and stuff like that.
Right.
She's pretty unstoppable.
Yeah, she's a badass and she's gorgeous, and she's certainly solid in this film. I thought the other lead that they had, she was
Kiki Lane.
Kiki Lane did a good job. Overall, I just the movie's a little too long and it gets a little stiff in the script at points. Has some hiccups, but super entertaining. A great world build, but again, it felt like a too long of a pilot.
Well, I do think that
you can tell
that flashback, like that happens 8 minutes, and they flash back, and it's like this whole reveal that they're immortal was really clunky and unnecessary.
Yeah, it was.
It was. Anything.
They could have. I think it could have found. It was probably a pretty direct thing that they were kind of doing with what was in the in the graphic novel series that they could have maybe done differently. And the movie is a little too long.
But what sucks about it, though, is that if you just read the description on Netflix, it tells you they're immortal and that they're going to find a new immortal. And so when you watch that, you're like, okay, I already know these people are immortal. Like, it felt like ruined by how it was all played out anyway.
It was. That's not like it's a surprise, and it happens so early, and you're informed so early. It's almost like could have found a more cinematic, interesting way to give you that information, even if you do it within the first 10 minutes of the film. But yeah, it really does feel like a pilot.
That being true, yeah, it was definitely an origin story. I mean, that was painfully clear. But what they did with that once you knew what it was, I thought was pretty cool.
I do.
The way that they introduced the modern immortal, which is basically what the plot surrounds. So there's all these old immortals. They've been around for a long time. And a new one comes out for the first time in hundreds of years. And it's a woman that's in the Marines.
Yes.
Or the Army. I think it's the Marines. She gets killed in combat and has no idea about any of this world. And she's brought to the morgue and then wakes back up and has no idea what's going on. And I thought they portrayed that really well.
Yeah. And the fact that she's a woman in combat in a Marine unit that's made of all women, because the whole point of being in Afghanistan, like the separation of the sexes is a big deal. So these are like, I like how it felt very natural storytelling to have her as a character. Like it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like they were trying for a diversity angle. It was just part of the story and the character. And that's something they thread really expertly throughout, which is incredible diversity, and it didn't feel forced or heavy-handed or smacking you across the face with it.
Yeah, tons of diversity. Yeah. This film is super diverse.
Oh, the only love story in the whole thing is between two guys.
Yeah, the main...
And it's cute and sweet, and it feels earned. I mean...
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It didn't feel forced at all. No. I actually really liked those characters. I thought that was handled super well. It wasn't in your face. It wasn't like, ooh, look at us trying to be,
even when it was a little in your face, like when they've been taken prisoner and they're in that the prison bus or whatever, the guard makes fun of him and says, "What's he, your boyfriend?" And his comeback was one of the best. Like
it was
one of the best scenes in the whole movie, but it was one of the best like defenses of that whole thing that I've ever heard too.
Yeah, I thought like that's when I was saying like that, because there's a lot of different levels that they're hitting thematically with this, and that idea of relationship and sex and stuff. That was the best handled one that felt like that there was some poetry to it, that there was, like it landed with impact. Other times when they were delving with bigger ideas or thematic ideas in dialogue, a lot of it just was kind of to the point and out of there, and it, which is fine to some degree, but that particular moment, I was like, oh, that was good. Like, I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. Like,
and I'll say,
I wish you would have said some other bigger things in that same realm, like played with that a little bit more. But yeah.
Really, and I love how modern action movies now they care about choreography for the most part. We'll get into Guns Akimbo afterwards, but like watching this thing, you can tell they hired a really good action choreographer. The the actors themselves are all very like Kiki Lane was really physical, and I was convinced that she could kick some ass, as well as Charlize Theron has always been great with that, with the physical part of the job. So
incredibly
that was surprising
well
to see.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously it's the style is highly influenced by John Wick.
Oh, yeah, it changed action movies.
It's the new great influence. I mean, I haven't seen that big of an impact on action choreography and style since
John Woo.
Since John Woo broke in the States and The Matrix came out and all these movies that are doing the slow-mo bullet time and all that kind of stuff.
Do you know what's fun is going back and watching the 80s action movies that we grew up with, and they're so bad. It's just guys sitting there shooting a gun, and then the guy pops out and shoots a gun, and then they fall over. Or they get launched on a springboard. And that's it. Like,
or something explodes for no reason, and then they show it from 4 different angles.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because they had 4 cameras that day, so they have to show us all of them.
And they only had
they're just blasting into the jungle, and something explodes in the jungle.
Hut.
Yeah. They have exploding pineapples in the jungle now.
Well, but that would be actually a really fun thing to do. Would be an evolution of the action scene, and kind of go through
totally
the trends.
But so as far as effects go in this movie, I thought they did a pretty brilliant job with they depended a whole lot on showing wounds and healing and all that stuff, because that's they can't die or whatever. So they it wasn't really gore so much as it was wounds closing up and stuff that they did really well, I thought. But there was one thing that I found kind of wrong with what I thought was one of the most awesome scenes in the movie was when they recalled the whole drowning thing.
Yeah.
The new girl has a nightmare of somebody that's drowning underwater, and she's immortal. And then they all tell her that it's the spirit of this previous immortal that got captured, and they sell the whole thing about this is why they don't like to get captured. And they show her being thrown into a Iron Maiden of sorts or whatever and tossed into the water. And the whole concept is that she's immortal, so she'll drown and then she wakes up and then drowns again for a long time, which is an awesome concept. It's terrifying.
Yeah,
but
centuries or whatever.
Right. But there's a problem with that. When you breathe, you're not just like taking in air. You're exchanging air for your waste, carbon dioxide and stuff. There's an exchange happening there, and when you're underwater, when you drown, your lungs fill up with water. And they can't exchange oxygen from the water into your blood, and they can't exchange carbon dioxide from your blood into
So how could she come back to life underwater until she was brought out?
It might happen a couple times where you would just basically pass out because there's no oxygen in your blood. But after a while, there's nothing to react there to even, biologically bring back to life. So that was... my nerd brain just dove deep into that.
Tom just ruined one of the coolest parts of the movie for everybody.
It was still awesome. I'm not going to say it's not awesome. It was cool as hell.
It's you're right, but it's one of those things that's a level of suspension of disbelief that I don't have to think.
Yeah, I mean they're already immortal, so whatever.
Why they're able to do it.
So, and it was it's a cool idea because if you're down there at the bottom of the ocean and alive or whatever,
it's insane.
That long.
Yeah, it's a fate worse than death.
The level of insanity you would have coming back out of that water into a world that you have no fucking idea what it's like. Like, it has changed so dramatically.
Yeah, how crazy.
An Iron Maiden in the bottom of the ocean.
I was waiting for them to bring that character back at the end, and then she would be like the villain or something because she's insane. And anyway.
Right.
I was a little disappointed that they didn't really bring that character.
I expect that will happen in the future.
I hope so.
Be a bad
and that was one of my only other criticisms was that it wasn't. I didn't think they did something wrong, but what I really wanted to see was an immortal on immortal fight. And honestly, like when they turned out one of the immortals betrayed them. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but like I was like, okay, it's on. Like there's going to be an immortal on immortal fight, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, that was the worst.
The whole resolution of that whole
thing in that script was that turn and that because it meant nothing. There was no buy into or buy back. It was a device that was just totally misused and didn't really work. At that point, you kind of didn't care, but yeah, like they did nothing with it. It went nowhere. It was really it was unnecessary. It was completely unnecessary plot device because when the girls
they already had a villain. They already had an established villain.
A couple of them, really.
So it did seem like at a place there, but also like there didn't seem to be a whole lot of motivation for it, like money or something.
Right, there was that's the thing. Like, there's no follow up to that. There was no payoff, and it was stupid, and it was basically used to bring the girl back because if you remember, no bullets or whatever. But that's unnecessary. This is the hero's journey, so that hero moving away from their destiny can feel it immediately, and it's just like, I can't leave these people. Turn around. It's just as strong. It's probably even stronger decision because they make it on their own with nothing to necessarily force them to make that decision.
Yeah, and the villain to me was just I didn't understand his motivation at all because it was like he put in all this effort to hunt down, kidnap, potentially like torture these people when they didn't even have any like outreach to be like, hey, we have like a sack of money. Can we just maybe get some blood samples? Can we wheel and deal and work on something to get why would you go to kidnapping people?
Because he's crazy and insane and super bad guy.
Yeah, it was like...
And then there wouldn't be a movie.
Again, you gotta sometimes just not think about it too much and just enjoy the movie in front of you.
Let's move on to a new movie. I mean, I think we can all agree that we enjoyed this film and it's worth watching. It definitely has some drawbacks.
I hope they do more.
One more thing that I just wanted to mention was the villain himself, Merrick. There, I thought he was a little over the top, but it was kind of rightfully so.
Well, he had nothing to work with, so it was just...
Yeah, I mean, he's just evil corporate guy that likes money and being corporate-y.
Yeah, there was no depth to the character, And I mean, I guess in the way he was interjected in the storyline, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad because the other characters have so much. Like, they're pretty deep, they have, thousands of years of backstory and stuff.
And as much time as we spent in the movie, they could have tossed a little more time to develop one or both, that bad guy.
Well, I wish they would have followed Copley, like his story. If we found the Immortals through his storyline, like his wife dies, he's looking for a drug to help. He gets their scent. Like that would have been a better reveal of all those characters.
Again, it's all the same.
Right.
It all falls back to it would just be a better series. As a series, I think it's going to be a series of films. I guarantee you. And one other interesting point about this movie is it is the first action film ever directed by a black female.
Oh, I didn't know that shit. You mean that like for Netflix or?
No, ever in history.
What? Okay.
No, yeah.
Hey, she did a decent job. I hope she
did. She did a good job. Young too, young black woman did a fantastic job with this film, and
cool.
So I'm looking for it. I think
I'll watch the next
forward
one.
to the sequel.
I want them to spend more time in the past,
story.
though, for sure. I want to see more throughout history, crazy battles.
Well, that's the thing with this that it has. I just wish they would fucking turn it into a series, but I mean,
all right,
because there is so much you could do with this. It's almost like a group of Highlanders, but there can be more than one, and they're the Lay's potato chips of Immortals, and
there can be more than one. That's the tagline for the sequel.
There can be more than one. Anyways, worth watching. I mean, it's on Netflix, so you ain't spending money on it.
No, and I even said I watched that while lifting weights and working out, and it was like the perfect movie for it because it's got some good action, enough plot to keep me a little bit engaged.
Getting swole, bro.
Tom and I are also really buff. You just can't.
Yeah.
It's all legs. It's all in the legs.
It's in there somewhere.
All right, so let's
go to Guns Akimbo.
Guns Akimbo.
We don't have to spend too much time on this one, I don't think. But,
Someone's trying to kill me! Please, go drive now!
Another schism.
Schism picked random psychos, weirdos, and criminals and made them fight each other to the death. And then I came into the picture.
You scared yet?
Welcome to Schism.
I'm not a fighter. I'm a nobody. Hey, I need help!
Oh, it's one thing to say you can't face violence, but when it faces you, you better be ready.
Did I win?
But here's another graphic novel, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and for those that don't know, Guns Akimbo I think is mostly a video game term these days, but it means when you have two pistols and you're shooting two pistols at the same time.
Yeah, man. Again, you can thank John Woo. But yeah, this is another graphic novel adaptation, I'm positive, and it stars Harry Potter. So there's that. Daniel Radcliffe is the star of this film, as well as Samara Weaving, sorry.
Who was in Ready or Not, which I've really enjoyed. I recommend checking that out.
But you know what? When you just brought that up, I just realized that's the same girl. So that's kind of impressive, actually. And she's not given a lot to work with in this film.
No.
She has the most interesting story, like her
has the only interesting storyline and character in the whole thing, yet she gets, she's not the star. She's only a supporting character.
She's like the minor villain, or like the underboss, kind of. Richter is the bad guy who's played by not Michael Berryman. I thought it was him.
That guy that looks like Michael Berryman, but it's not Michael Berryman. That guy,
and he runs some sort of streaming show called Schism,
right?
Where criminals are sort of forced to fight to the death live on TV, and it's a super hit. Everybody loves it. It's ambiguously the near future.
Yep.
Or something. And it's kind of a comic book universe. It looks really bright and colorful and extreme.
I guess. Yeah, so that's basically the setup. It's, and then Daniel Radcliffe obviously is the fish out of water, the guy who, gets stuck in playing the game, going against the most vicious, reigning champ, which is Samara Weaving's character. And, and he does it because he wants to save his love, basically, and he wakes up with, guns nailed to his hands.
Well, just remind me how that happened. So he's, trolling online, right?
Yeah, he's an internet troll.
Is that how he gets chosen?
Well, he's not just a troll. I mean, he has, some sort of stature in that realm. But, yeah, he goes in here, he trolls them in a really some of the weakest trolling I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I don't know why they even cared, but yeah.
Poorly trolled. And this guy has really poor control of his the bad guy has control of his emotions and his impulse control.
Well, he's just super evil.
Well, yeah, he's so evil that when someone goes, "You're a jerk," he takes him and puts guns on his hands and then forces him into a death match to save his girl, who he's probably going to murder anyways because he's that evil.
Right. And when you say puts guns in his hands, they don't just put guns in his hands. They bolt guns through his hands and fingers and then screw his fingers onto the triggers. And somehow these bullets have 50... Or somehow these guns have 50 bullets
I don't know where they were storing those bullets.
It's ridiculous.
I think it's the RoboCop gun. It's just
they're 9mm. Like they're like they must be laser shots. We just they just fire like a 9mm round apparently. But that's the thing with this movie. It wants to be cool, but it's as cool as its lead character.
Right. Well,
basically what this movie is. I mean, and he's not. Let's just put it this way: he's not cool at all. Well, it just has so many issues around it.
Yeah, that's why Samara Weaving is way more interesting. Literally, her character's superpower is doing a bunch of cocaine. Like that is hilarious.
Right,
yeah.
Yeah,
I think she had her eyelids removed for this
just probably needed some more development or something.
She does not blink.
The fact that the lead character is kind of milquetoast and boring, like I'm so sick of that as the.
Yeah, I know. It's the Jesse Eisenberg, the Michael Cera, the fucking Daniel Radcliffe, the fucking whoever.
Then he's got to rescue his girlfriend. It's just so like we kind of know this storyline.
Or he does to rescue the girl he wants to be his girlfriend, but he's way too nerdy and she's super hot, and then they hook up anyways at the end.
Yeah,
none of it ever makes sense.
And the premise of having the guns in your hand was fun, and I wanted to watch that movie. Like the reason I watched the movie was because I thought the premise was so freaking hilarious and weird, and they sort of executed a little bit like him trying to drive and get his pants on, and but then
Radcliffe
it was like kind of got old quick, and you're like, okay, now
they
we're
got a
gonna
great
go
lead, and if you think about it, like they did, that helped the movie and helped me get through
the performances were all on point. It was just the characters themselves that were a little weak,
underwritten, underdeveloped, or too obvious, too on the nose.
We should note that the director was the same guy that made Deathgasm.
Yes, that's also why I watched the movie.
Which is from New Zealand.
Yeah, and it's fun.
It's from New Zealand, and their sort of sense of humor is a little different than ours, and their like sensibilities and dialogue and culture and all that are a little different. So it's probably where like the sort of like
the translation
stuff that doesn't really work comes from. Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, because it doesn't feel like a Kiwi movie.
Well, Deathgasm was really brutal. Like it had brutal kills. It was kind of like inspired by Brain Dead or whatever the New Zealand version of that Peter Jackson one. You could tell there was like those influences on it. And so I was really excited when I heard about this movie because I was a fan of Deathgasm. And I just, it's a sophomore. It might be one of those sophomore issues where he kind of learned the wrong lessons from what worked in the first film or tried something, and who knows? Filmmaking's hard, man.
Yeah, and also if it's not set in New Zealand, then he's technically writing like out of his element. So
that's what I'm saying. Like he's a Kiwi filmmaker, and Deathgasm has a real strong Kiwi edge to it. You feel it; it's great, and it works.
It's part of its charm.
But he's trying to make an American, action comedy type, like dark thriller, whatever the fuck, and it just doesn't. It just doesn't translate,
it's like when Jackie Chan made his first big American movie, it was kind of a dud.
Rumble in the Bronx.
Oh, that was a terrible one. The thing that I liked about it was actually Daniel Radcliffe, him, Shia LaBeouf, Robert Pattinson, like they're all choosing weird movies with interesting directors who have a vision. So as much as I don't think that character was very good, he did what he could. Then I hope he keeps doing it. He doesn't have to care about any money anymore because of his, success with the Harry Potter series. So I'm encouraged to see him choosing movies like this, even if they're not, home runs. I'd rather see him be in Guns Akimbo than just like a total boring ass drama or something.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's unfortunate, but thankfully it doesn't have a long run time.
No, and honestly, like if Saturday night, late at night, if you're laying in bed with a glass of whiskey, like put it on, you'll probably like it better than we did.
Make sure you get really stoned, right? So if you saw this podcast and you're like, I don't know what to watch, I feel like something with over the top, then get really high, drink some whiskey, and then watch it. You might enjoy it.
You could do worse.
Moments. It was it could be worse. There's
listen. I didn't fall asleep,
but I just didn't. I didn't.
I got through the whole thing, which says something.
In the end, for me, this one fails. But other people, I think I could see other people enjoying it a little more than I did. I've indulged in so much action films from so many different areas and arenas and time periods that this one just didn't work for me. So, and then so that's Guns Akimbo. How about do we want to do the Five Bloods?
Let's jump in.
Yeah,
let's jump into the Five Bloods, another Spike Lee joint.
Gentlemen, welcome back to Vietnam.
We bury it. Later on, we come back and collect.
Being back here, it is not easy.
Hold on!
In my line of work, I have to be very careful.
By the way, the trailer for this
was that at
incredible.
the beginning? Was Spike Lee joint?
I took notes.
Nice. Was Spike Lee joint at the beginning? Was it a Spike Lee joint?
It was in the trailer. I don't know if I remember seeing the movie.
All right. Maybe he wasn't allowed to use that anymore. There are.
He sued himself.
Well, it just might not have been allowed because there's very specific guidelines under all the different unions in terms of how you can, the size and placement, where certain fucking credits go, and maybe if this wasn't a straight up independent film for which he could put whatever the hell he wants on there, but if it started going under certain guidelines from some of the unions, he might not be able to call it a Spike Lee joint.
I took a whole lot of notes in this, and that one right there. Yeah,
Trump is bad.
That seemed to stand out.
Certainly did.
But one of the characters was a Trump supporter.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting choice, and something that we haven't seen in modern cinema really. Even acknowledging that black Trump people exist.
Right.
So I really like that idea, and then that character had like the biggest journey throughout the whole thing. Anyway, I mean, he was the most
great
the most damaged.
By Delroy Lindro.
Yeah. He was the most damaged, the most intense. I don't know he probably had the most dialogue too, because he kept going on these like rants and stuff.
It's basically a movie about a group of African American soldiers that fought together in Vietnam. They come together now as obviously much older gentlemen, basically elderly, to go back to Vietnam to find their platoon leader's body, to recover their body. But it's also underneath.
Storm and Norman.
There's a heist movie that runs underneath it.
It turns out, they found gold that they buried with the body.
And there's also a father-son movie going on here.
The son shows up, so there's that plot line.
So,
there's also a documentary about Vietnam going on, and
Vietnam
and a black culture history lesson.
Yeah, there's a video essay going along with the movie that tells you characters or people throughout history you need to pay attention to. Yeah.
This movie is really long, incredibly long, over 2.5 hours long. This movie does not know what movie it wants to be from the beginning to the end for the most part. Now, that's not to say there are some fucking great moments in this film, some really good performances, but obviously you're going and doing this Vietnam thing where we're seeing flashbacks of them when they were in Vietnam with this platoon leader who was obviously highly influential on them and was a really strong, powerful voice for them. So we're seeing a lot of flashbacks, but totally destroyed by the choice to have the characters that in modern times play themselves when they were 18 or 19 years, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. It fucking took me out in all of it. And then the things that would have worked, like put your fist in the fucking middle, like we got to do this. Like if they were all young, yeah, that works. When you got a bunch of elderly dudes, like fucking power up, that that alone, and I didn't, in all, honesty, I didn't finish this film. I watched about an hour and a half of it, like about half. I watched about half of this film.
I mean,
and I didn't finish it.
This film is definitely the problem with when Netflix is giving filmmakers, a platform without any kind of feedback. And that's kind of their whole thing, is they're empowering filmmakers to make their films. And this, I think, is what happens when you do that. Occasionally you'll get somebody who does something great, but truly the studios and producers are supposed to exist to help rein in directors and keep them focused and I truly believe that some of the best films are made better because they had to compromise a little bit in their vision to fit. If somebody just told Spike Lee okay, you have 3 movies here, which one do you want to make? Do you want to make the father-son one? Do you want to make the heist one? Do you want to make?
Is if he re-edited all of them, and he made the social commentary documentary and did what documentary film? Was it Herzog's film, the one that was on the MK Ultra thing, the 6-part series where part of it was a docudrama with amazing cast Skarsgård, Peter Skarsgård, and all these great actors were portraying the dramatized parts of it, and then the rest was interview, and it was mostly interview with that scientist's son who was supposedly committed suicide out of a hotel window, which didn't happen. He was murdered by the CIA or whatever. But it was really, and he could take footage from the movie, and then he could take all of that stuff and that commentary and that stuff and turn and do one movie, and he could easily do. We're going to get our buddy movie, although you really should redo those flashbacks. But yeah, there's literally 3 movies you could.
Yeah, and if he put all that effort into one movie, I think it would have been exactly the movie I've been dying to see. And that's the really frustrating thing about this movie is the story, the approach, the setting. Is the movie I wanted to watch in Vietnam. Because I studied this in high school, the Vietnam War. I read a lot of books on it. I traveled to Ho Chi Minh City to film, and also Phu Quoc and other parts of just around Vietnam, twice in the last few years. I used to have a
conversation with my dad.
I've been dying to watch this movie.
He worked at the Pentagon, and he was drafted, but because he had such a high level of education, they put him in the Pentagon. So he worked intelligence, and he's taught classes on it and stuff. But
that's the thing is I want to hear the story from the black soldiers. I want to know that we never tell their perspective properly. I want to hear the story from the Vietnamese perspective, and there's a little bit of that in there. There was a really great film inside of here that I just wish somebody could have. I honestly wish Spike Lee produced this and just hired a young black filmmaker. Hell, what was the filmmaker from Old Guard? Maybe he should have hired her and make a film and chose one of the films, whether it's a heist one. Right. It's cool. I'd be okay with that. I'd rather see the drama of going back to get your dead buddy. But you know what?
I would rather see that film. You know what would be interesting?
100 minutes, and that's it.
Who's the really good deep fake guy out there? Re-edit this film and then deep fake all the flashback stuff with some of the best young actors' faces, Donald Glover and Omar Epps and
Well, that's also the shame of it.
Put the deep fake.
How many good young?
But it would work. It would work.
But how many good young actors would be so grateful to get a role in a Spike Lee movie? Agree. And they could have, he could have launched some 5 new careers. It's kind of a shame.
Absolutely. I agree.
There isn't. I completely agree that it's kind of an error of entertainment. That takes you out of it. That to see the grown up actors in the flashbacks. However, I did think it was an effective way of making you sort of know that it was them remembering this. That it wasn't an actual depiction of everything that happened accurately. Because and I thought that was neat. It didn't work really. Or it would have been nice if it faded into younger actors or something. I would eventually go to younger actors.
Yeah,
whatever. But either way, I agree. It didn't work, but I like the attempt. You know, I mean, he's trying stuff, you know, and not everything works. But I thought was cool.
I'm glad they didn't do the de-aging thing.
Oh, de-aging is the worst.
Worse. That's the worst. I
Yeah.
hate that. You know, and I mean, it's suffice it to say is worth 3 white middle-aged dudes talking about a movie that's basically really focused on the black experience. So don't fucking listen to us at all, really. To be honest with you.
My recommendation at the end of our review would be, don't listen to us really, because go judge for yourself for sure. Because the story and the perspective is such a great place to start. And those characters,
moments.
I would hang out with those fucking actors, or just those characters in Vietnam in a bar. Like, I could have spent an hour just with them talking.
I mean,
some of that dialogue, that like back and forth, like early on when they're at the bar and like the
it's so fun.
That was so good. Like that was done really well. You know, that's what
there's
that's the movie
3
I really
or 4
wanted to see.
Good movies in this movie. Like there's You know, I like Spike Lee as a filmmaker. I mean, Black Klansman was one of the best movies
incredible. Yeah,
ever.
It was really good.
There's not a whole lot bad to say about it other than like the message is kind of hammered at you, which is not atypical for Spike Lee movies. You know, I mean, he's got his messages and he delivers them.
He pushes a strong voice, that's for sure.
Yeah, I liked all the storylines separately. I would have, it would have been interesting to see each one of them on their own as opposed to interwoven in this big tumbleweed of intensity. The other interesting thing to me, like I did see it all the way through, and like the first hour and a half is much slower and much calmer and much more subtle, and like there's a part where they like shit on the Rambo movies for being improperly depicting and overly violent and all that stuff. But then one of the really like sort of overt storylines that pops in is when after the son shows up, he goes out to a bar somewhere and he meets this French girl. And she says, me and my friends, we get rid of landmines and blah, blah, blah. And landmines are bad and they kill people.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so from the moment I saw that scene, I was like, oh, somebody's getting blown up.
Right.
And so then later on when they're going off to get the gold, the son says, I'm going off to take a piss or shit or something. And I was like, oh, he's getting blown up for sure. But instead, that's when they, make their big break, and they start digging around, and they've got a metal detector, and I'm like, somebody's getting blown up, and it doesn't happen there, but it does happen, and when it does, it's the most violent shit you've ever seen. Basically, that is all that's left of the guy that gets blown up, but he's still alive for like a minute, and just blood's like.
Ah, right. So I have to finish this movie, apparently, is what you're trying to tell me. And the message is...
Well, also, like, there's a killing... people start getting killed left and right. And I'm not going to say who, and I'm not going to say why, because you should see it for yourself. But one of the people gets killed by some Vietnamese gangsters. And it's the most shot I've seen somebody get since RoboCop from the Ed 209. Like, they shoot him like 80 times.
I didn't even get to that
times,
version
maybe.
of this movie. You know, the high concept fucking gore fucking.
But that's why there's another movie. There's the fifth movie inside of the movie. It's like.
Yeah, that's crazy. I don't know.
I kind of lost interest by the end. It was so long, and by the end of it, I really didn't care. I was like, I don't really care who lives and who dies. Like, let's just end.
Did you get to the landmine bit though?
I mean, I made it through the whole thing. But
okay.
I'm the only one that did. I only made it to about it.
Well, I mean, what was your take on the violence? I mean, was the violence there as a message, or was that an organic part of the story?
The whole landmine thing. Listen, I actually thought the landmine thing was ridiculous at first because I knew it was coming as well, and it's so obvious when it's going to happen. Like you were saying, I was expecting it to be like come out of nowhere. And instead, they like totally telegraph it. And I was like, why is that guy walking back? Oh, okay, like this is when it's and then it did. Mm-hmm. And then it suddenly went into like the whole like gangster shootout thing. And then by that point, I was like, I don't really care about this movie. Like, I cared about the characters. Oh, well, the other thing, the characters are like, and then what's his name? I don't want to say who does, but one of the guys who gets shot by all the gangsters. I was like, okay, that's kind of a fitting end to his character, but like, it just felt like it suddenly was a little bit ridiculous, like how they overly killed him, and I was like, it didn't feel like a drama anymore. It felt like a cheesy action movie.
The other thing is when they rescue a guy from a landmine.
Yes. Well, that was actually kind of fun.
Right, but here's the thing, though. Like, they go through this whole big dramatic scene of, like, they put a rope around him, and they're super careful, and then everybody, like, yanks, and it blows up, and he makes it, But they had, like, 500 pounds of gold right there. Why couldn't they have just taken a couple of bars of gold and, like, Indiana Jones did? It'd still be intense and dramatic, but, like, they put the gold bars down on the landmine, and then they have to sacrifice those.
But they all step on landmines.
Yeah. And then everybody, movie's over.
Nick, try to finish it, and so we can see what you think about it.
Of course, I will. I mean, I watched half the movie. I'm going to finish it, and it's Spike Lee is one of the major independent filmmakers of our generation of all time, for sure.
But this is why
I have to watch all his movies, and I'm not even the biggest Spike Lee fan.
Yeah. But this is the good and bad of Netflix.
The man deserves attention.
This is what Netflix and Amazon are doing: is they're giving complete license to filmmakers. So we're going to see a lot of weird and cool and bad stuff. I mean,
that's okay with me. I'd rather see this than most of the movies that came out this year. To be honest with you, at least it's a.
You don't want to watch Captain America 7?
No, I'm fucking sick of that shit. I haven't missed going to the movie theater to see another goddamn superhero movie. Yeah. There's a couple of them that I'm looking forward to. The new Dune, I'm looking forward to.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, so why don't we wrap this up?
I've heard some good buzz from some important people, so I don't know. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, Tenet's going to be pretty badass too.
I'm looking forward to that one as well. Definitely. There's a few movies I'm looking forward to that are bigger budgeted ones, but again, it's from
there's movies that actually want to see in the theater, and
right,
not going to happen this year.
Yeah, I don't think so, man. But yeah, so there's 3 movies you can stream right now since you can't go to the movie theaters. We told you what we thought. Don't say we didn't warn you.
But go see it for yourself. None of these are bad.
Go watch it now.
If you're looking for something to watch, any one of these is going to be good for, average bored watching or whatever. But
I also watched
if you want to see,
but I guess we'll review that another day.
No, yeah, let's not get into that right now.
Have you guys seen that?
No, but I intend to.
No, okay.
No.
We'll talk next week.
Because I can't afford just another, I got rid of Apple Plus right away, because I'll tell you what, their shows are terrible. Just awful garbage. Like, most of their fucking original content is trash. So I can't pay for everything all the time.
I'll review it so you don't have to watch it next week.
Thank you. All right, sounds good. So next week it is.
In the meantime, check us out on ScreenRadar.com, Facebook, Twitter. There's other ones.
Instagram.
Podbean. We have the audio version of this will be on podcast. So
it should be up on iTunes soon if it's not already there. We're working on.
We're working on it.
A couple technical issues.
All right,
so that's it.
And thanks, Lucas. I'm Tom.
My pleasure.
And that's Nick.
All